in the queue.
We won't hold our breath.
I'm not a queue.
Claire Blighton, please. Claire Blighton.
Was it a violation of Gordon Brown's privacy to be asked about his medication that he takes?
And I have to say this is the second most asked question we had tonight. Was it a violation? This is a reference to a question that Andrew Marr asked, I think, on BBC, on the Andrew Marr show. He said a lot of people in this country use prescription painkillers to get them through. Are you one of them? In the context of everybody, as he put it, talking about it in the Westminster Village. Is it a violation of his privacy to be asked that question? Theresa May, this goes to the heart of what politicians can be asked, should be asked, and should reveal.
Yes, it does, and I generally take the view that politicians shouldn't try to tell journalists what questions they should be asking. I didn't see the interview. I've only heard I haven't even seen a clip of this bit of the interview. I've just heard about what the questions were. I have to say I'm not comfortable about that question being asked to the Prime Minister, and I think that it was not appropriate for that sort of question to be asked to the Prime Minister. And one of the reasons I say that is, frankly, there are so many bigger issues out there. I mean, you know, the size of the public debt, cuts in public spending, what needs to be done to get this country's finances back on track. And I think those were the questions that should have been pressed, and not a question of the sort which was a question which was very private. So, yes, I don't think that question should have been asked.
It has to be said it was a question that wasn't originally put by Andrew Marr. It had been around because Charles Clarke had referred to it a week before, and The Independent had referred to it sometime before that, to his health. And Charles Clarke had said that he think his own dignity ought to look at that kind of solution when asked whether the Prime Minister might stand down citing ill health. So it was out there.
Well, it was said it was out. I mean, I understand Andrew Marr claimed that this was being rumoured around the Westminster Village. I have to say I've never heard it rumoured around the Westminster Village.
Rubbish.
Okay, well, we'll come to you in a moment, Ben Bradshaw. We'll perhaps come to you now. What do you say?
I thought it was outrageous, absolutely outrageous. I mean, we can't go back to an age like we had in the past where we didn't know that Churchill had a stroke or that Roosevelt was in a wheelchair or that Eden was on prescription jobs. We can't, but every individual is entitled to a sphere of privacy, and I think your medical records, your medical history is part of that. I think we are entitled to know if someone who is our Prime Minister or is standing for the highest office has got a health condition that could impair them or damage the way they do that job. But what was outrageous about this question was that the BBC had specifically asked Number 10, based on these smears and innuendos that were on a right-wing blog, several times whether it was true, and Number 10 had denied it. And yet Andy still asked the question, which gave it legitimacy and gave it the exposure. I hadn't heard about it. I mean, the BBC says that this was common knowledge and everyone was talking about it. I'm a cabinet minister, for goodness sake, and I hadn't heard about it or heard these rumours. I think it was a real. Well, I'm
the Independent on the 10th of September.
Well, I don't have.
That's the Daily Telegraph on the 8th of September. That's the Evening Standard a week before.
It was out there. Been run in private eye.
Well, private eye is hardly the same thing as these.
Well, it's much more reliable.
Yeah.
It may surprise you, David and David, but some of us have other things to do with our time than read blogs or private eye all the time. I think it was completely outrageous, and I think it was an error. I think it was an error of judgment.
Come on.
All right, you think it was an error of judgment?
Yeah.
Charles Kennedy.
I don't think you should put artificial boundaries at all on what journalists can ask you, and I think if you stand for elected office and you're in that position, then you've got to take whatever gets thrown in your direction, and it's up to you how you want to respond to it. I didn't know about all this stuff that was apparently swirling around either. The only thing I'd picked up was the week before watching the American network interview where a similar set of questions were asked of him. And I remember watching that quite innocently from the G20 coverage, I think, at the time, and thinking, God, yeah, that's American politics for you. You know, woe betide us if we reach the stage that you get such X-ray intensity about everybody in public life, everybody in this platform, everybody in every shape and form. I don't think that's healthy in the American context, and I bemoan the fact if we become more and more and more like that in the British context. But I don't think at the end of the day, if it had been asked, which it had on the other side of the Atlantic, it was particularly unreal to expect it not to raise its head over
It
here.
was a slightly different question, but you had direct experience of this because you were asked whether you had a drink problem.
Sure.
The BBC apologised to you for that, and then later you revealed you did actually have a drink problem. You publicly came out with it. So
Yeah, I always
was the question legitimate? Should the BBC have apologised
Well,
to you?
I didn't ask for an apology, never once, and I've never got into any argument with any journalist or any journalistic or broadcasting organisation that raised those questions. I felt, and people will form their own judgment, I was entitled to my own privacy in the way that I was dealing with that at the time, those number of years ago, but I didn't seek any apology from the BBC. It was forthcoming from Greg Dyke at the time, actually, quite unprompted by the Lib Dems and certainly unprompted by me.
Okay. You, sir.
Surely if even a few people are talking about something, they have the right to ask the Prime Minister. Why should anyone not be given a platform to ask a question to the Prime Minister of their own country?
But are you saying that the BBC, as a publicly funded broadcaster, or actually any responsible journalist, should give credence and credibility to what are unfounded, denied, untrue, rumour and smear on a right-wing blog? Sorry. That's not responsible journalism.
Do you think the BBC should make a public apology for it?
No,
the way they apologised.
I don't think it's that big a deal. I just think it was an unfortunate mistake, and I think it's part of the trivialisation and degradation of our political discourse.
You, sir.
I had a lot of sympathy with people who were annoyed and angry about the questioning earlier in the week, but I was rather dismayed as the week went on to hear Sarah Brown talking about Gordon Brown being untidy around the house and being noisy, and I think this picks up perhaps Ben Bradshaw's point about the trivialisation of politics. And maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned, but you kind of can't have your cake and eat it, and actually I'm not particularly interested in whether Gordon Brown is untidy in his house either, and that seems to me to be a personal issue which I would like separated away from the issues which we actually all need politicians to be discussing.
Dambisa Moyo.
I actually take quite a different view. I prefer more information to less information. And the question is, perhaps, and like Theresa May, I actually did not see the program, unfortunately. But I think the issue is, do we have the right, as part of the public, to know what the health condition of the leader of the country is? And for me, I think the answer is yes. I think it's important. It's particularly in as much as it determines how the leadership can perform going forward. Now, obviously a line has to be drawn, and that's where it becomes a bit tricky, but certainly I think that we are entitled as a society to know exactly what the condition of the leadership is. I mean, it goes to the issues of whether policy making is going to be fruitful in the years to come, and also to the extent that the leader is unwell, we need to know about issues of succession. I mean, this is more of a broader point, but I think it's critically important for us to know what the state of the leader is.